While Gibbons was alive, the harm was still largely internal. Scientists in conflict with management, inaccurate results moving through a system not yet visible to regulators. After his death, Theranos expanded. In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services found that Theranos' Newark, California lab posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. The specific issue was warfarin testing. Warfarin is a blood thinner. If your dosage is wrong, too high or too low, the consequences include internal bleeding, stroke, or death. Patients were adjusting their medication based on Theranos results. In May 2016, Theranos voided 2 full years of Edison device results.
When you void 2 years of results, you are telling patients, retroactively, that every decision you made in that window may have been based on nothing.
And there's no mechanism to trace what those decisions were. The Arizona Attorney General eventually filed suit and settled for $4.65 million. Refunds to every Arizona resident who received a Theranos test, regardless of whether they'd been notified their results were wrong. Approximately 1.5 million inaccurate blood tests had been run in Arizona alone. The full scope of patient harm remains unknown. For every person who got a letter, there were people who never knew their results had been voided, who made a treatment decision in that gap and never found out the data under it was fiction.
What was the regulatory timeline here? How does a company run clinical tests on millions of patients for over a decade without a serious federal intervention?
That's the failure that sits underneath the fraud. Holmes argued aggressively that her devices weren't subject to FDA oversight. The company operated in a gray zone it had deliberately constructed. The board, stacked with former secretaries of state and defense, not scientists, provided credibility without scrutiny. It wasn't until 2015 that meaningful FDA inspections began surfacing violations. By January 2016, CMS had issued a warning letter. By July 2016, Theranos' clinical lab certificate was revoked. The company had been running tests on patients since 2013. Holmes was ultimately convicted of fraud against investors and sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. The patient fraud charges, the harm to the people whose blood was actually in those machines, did not result in a conviction.
The people who built the board and the brand are the ones the system protected. The patients who never knew their results were wrong are the ones it didn't.